As the People's Liberation Army, the PLA, celebrates its 90th anniversary on August 1st, it is establishing its first overseas base in Djibouti, strategically situated at the Horn of Africa. What signal is China sending? China says that its overseas base is strictly for supplies and logistics, different from U.S. military bases. If so, will it remain so? Foreign analysts see another milestone in PLA expansion. How does the PLA respond? What is the PLA's grand plan for operating overseas beyond China's regional waters? How many aircraft carriers does China need? More significantly, what will be the impact of PLA modernization and restructuring? What really is going on? What kinds of advanced military technologies is China pursuing? What kinds of asymmetric warfare is it devising? More strategically, does China have the capacity or the intent to become a world peacekeeper or world policeman? Does China realize the risks? Following the PLA keeps us closer to China. On July 11th, ships carrying Chinese troops set out for Djibouti, Africa, to set up the People's Liberation Army's first overseas military base. China states that its base will be used for peacekeeping operations and humanitarian aid in Africa and West Asia. It will also enable military cooperation, naval exercises, and rescue missions. The PLA's move comes as China has ramped up investment and influence in Africa and the Indian Ocean in recent years. Located at the Horn of Africa, Djibouti hosts military bases of several foreign countries. Djibouti is favored for its location, sitting astride major shipping routes, and the country is considered a model of stability in an otherwise volatile region. The U.S. established its base in Djibouti after the terrorist attacks of 9/11. China's decision to set up a PLA base in the tiny African country was announced in 2015. The American and Chinese bases are less than 10 kilometers apart. To discuss future missions of the PLA, I speak with two distinguished military strategists and thought leaders. General Peng Guanqian, Deputy Secretary General of China's National Security Forum, and General Zhu Chenghu, former Dean of China's National Defense University. General Peng, it's very good to see you again. August 1st marks the 90th anniversary of the PLA, and the PLA has had some very clear policy objectives, and it's been consistent over the years, two of which are no foreign alliances that China would engage in. The other is no foreign expansions like military bases overseas. And yet we see now, for the first time in Djibouti, China and the PLA is establishing an overseas base. It's a very strategic position at the Horn of Africa, controlling the Red Sea and opening up into the Indian Ocean, so a very strategic location. Is China, the PLA, sending a message to the world with this first new base?
We are about to celebrate the 90th anniversary of the People's Liberation Army, the PLA, a grand event just around the corner. In the past, we have clarified our proposition of no expansion, but now we are going out to Djibouti. In your words, this is a base, so is there any hidden intention of expansion? I want to confirm that our national policy of a defensive nature has never changed, not in the past, in the present, or in the future. We will always stick to our defensive policy. Otherwise, we may not be called People's Liberation Army anymore.
Djibouti is not an official military base. The troop disposition and weapon storage is very limited. So I prefer to call it a resupply station, which is highly beneficial for fulfilling patrol tasks under the UN framework. Also, the station can offer supplies to escort fleets of other countries. And further, with the supply station, Chinese naval ships can perform better in the Gulf of Aden and the waters off Somalia. At least they no longer need to get their supplies from Pakistan or Yemen, or even sail back home. The station can enhance communications between China and Africa and promote exchanges of Chinese troops with forces of countries with military bases in Djibouti.
Tens of thousands of Chinese personnel are in areas that, frankly, are not so stable and have internal conflicts. And Chinese citizens could be used as bargaining chips in hostage situations. So the PLA in those areas may find itself with a difficult situation where governments that have less control of their areas are held hostage by rebel forces or whatever. And so the PLA might be in a position where it has to use military force from that base. Is that a possibility?
So far, I don't think the Chinese have the capability yet. The scale of the army in Djibouti is very limited. In my estimation, there are at most about 800 to 1,000 people there. Another thing is, with the lack of a transportation system, there's no way for Djibouti to send the Chinese troops from this base to other countries.
Are you thinking about relationships with the other military forces there in terms of coordinating activities so that no accident occurs in terms of ships can collide or other kinds of interactions? Are there some thinking about how then to coordinate? And also, if something does happen, are there what we call de-escalation procedures in place so that if an incident occurs, it can quickly be brought under control?
This is an emerging issue. Djibouti is not a country with a big population. It's not yet 1 million. And the land coverage is about 20,000 square kilometers, with 90% made up of mountainous regions. It may be some of the least developed areas in the world. However, it occupies a strategically important location at the crossing of the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. Therefore, a lot of countries have set up their military bases here: America, France, and even Japan. China's logistics base is now only about 10 kilometers from the American military base, so they are pretty close to each other. So will it be a problem? Well, personally, I think we have no intersection with countries as mentioned, not with America, the UK, France, or Japan. We confirm our spot for a logistics station through friendly communications with the Djibouti government. It is just a coincidence for us to be geographically close to the bases of other nations. As neighbors, I think we can have peaceful and friendly communications in between. Say you may run into a shortage of something that I happen to have, so I can lend that to you as a contingency. This is quite normal. I see no likelihood of conflicts in such a scenario. And if there does arise some small friction, I think we can sit down and solve the problem in its embryonic stage. However, if there is intentional provocation, we will defend ourselves. There is no other option around. Actually, Chairman Mao had long clarified our standpoint in the past. We will not attack unless we are attacked. If we are attacked, we will certainly counterattack. So self-defense is our resort in particular situations.
And we know the world today it has many hotspots. There are many areas of chaos, and it's seemingly that those areas are even growing in the future. And the need for peacekeeping on a UN basis is increasing. And so traditionally, the peacekeeping force of the world has been US-led. There's generally coalitions of dozens of other countries, but pretty much the U.S. had to carry the burden. Other people put their name in it, and some troops, but not a lot. In the future, because globalization is so important to China and world stability is necessary for globalization, do you see an increasing role for the PLA Navy in global peacekeeping under the UN?
Peacekeeping in the past has been led by the UN instead of the US. The actions are carried out, but within the general UN framework. Of course, the earlier ones may see greater involvement of the US, as the UN delegated certain peacekeeping operations and tasks to it. But as far as it is concerned at the moment, China contributes the greatest number of peacekeepers. Starting from 1990, and in the 27 years since then, China has seen more than 300,000 people involved in peacekeeping, 19 of whom have contributed their lives in so doing. So China has paid its price. It is fair to say among the UN security members, China has contributed the most forces in peacekeeping. That is undeniable. Secondly, as China quickens its step in going out and opening up, we will also increase our presence in foreign affairs, say peacekeeping or overseas military actions. There is no doubt about it. Thirdly, China's national interest is expanding. In the past, we have had limited military exchanges, actions, or national interests overseas. For instance, our oil imports were quite small in scale in the past, but now we have tremendous demand. And then, considering the widespread Chinese population, we can barely find any country in the world that does not have the presence of Chinese nationals today. No matter where an incident might occur, the chances are one or two Chinese are involved. So China is quickening up its step outside with more people overseas and expanding its national interests.
Let's look to the vision of the PLA in the world. Many people are concerned. The idea of a China threat is something that is talked about frequently. It very much annoys and irritates many of my friends in China. But it's a reality that many people in the world feel that way. So I'd like to look at two parts in terms of the PLA's role in the world. China is very dependent upon a stable world. China is perhaps the country of all the developed countries and economies that is more dependent on globalization, international trade than almost any other major country. On the other hand, there are several issues that are well discussed in which there are generally boundary questions or sovereignty questions that are very emotional on all sides. Looking at it from an overview, you would think that the need for world stability to work together should be much more important than some of those, I'm not going to say trivial, but things that are a matter of sometimes rocks in this place or that place. Am I being naive?
I quite agree with your opinion. It's not naive. First of all, I see a lot of common interests for China and the US. Both countries call for peaceful environment and stability. Particularly in the current situation, the economic development of China and America needs it. Both countries need external markets for development, and they can actually serve each other's needs. This is quite critical. Issues on the South China Sea, the Taiwan problem, the East Sea, the Korean Peninsula, and so on, I think China and America can actually cooperate to maintain peace and stability of the regions concerned. Frankly speaking, conflicts in those areas will do harm to both countries. Decision makers of the two countries would meet difficult choices, or may be caught in dilemmas. For example, if China gets involved in conflicts with other countries in the South China Sea, should America step up its intervention or not? If it doesn't, how will it answer to its allies, its nationals, and taxpayers? But if it does, both itself and China would pay a heavy price. So it naturally goes against the interests of both the Chinese and Americans. So under this scenario, I agree with what you said. The two countries have many reasons for cooperation to maintain peace and stability in the region, to maximize the national interests of both. On the other hand, we see clear divergences on these issues. A lot of Chinese people now think that all these problems arise under American provocation. Without Americans, such problems may not exist. Without Americans, how can we have issues with Taiwan or in the South China Sea? Without Americans' targeted military actions, why would China spend the money on military development? So when I went to Washington, D.C. years ago, I went to my opponents and thanked them and thanked the U.S. for inspiring us to grow. I'm not insulting or teasing Americans. Americans excel in their system of addressing many issues. For instance, they have a strategic evaluation system that evaluates their performance several years after the incidents to judge where they do well and where they do badly. But has the Pentagon evaluated American policy toward China? Have they considered the harm they did to the Chinese with their close investigations? And with their presence right at the door of China, the Chinese feel an intensity of imminent warfare and are getting ready for it. So frankly speaking, I think things as such may cause misunderstandings between China and America and may easily lead to fighting, which may give rise to an escalation of conflicts. This is very obvious.
Apart from overseas military expansion, the People's Liberation Army has embarked on a major systemic reform that affects almost every Chinese military institution. In February 2016, the PLA's 7 military command regions were streamlined into 5 battle zones, and agencies governing armaments, logistics, personnel, and politics have been placed directly under the authority of the Chinese Communist Party's Central Military Commission. Moreover, there are ongoing efforts to transform the PLA from a military dominated by the Army to one that enhances the role of the Navy, Air Force, and military units, integrating ground forces into joint command operations. Officials state that the aim of this military reform is to modernize the PLA for China's dynamic security requirements.
As you see the modernizations today, what impresses you the most? Which of the areas of PLA modernization are you particularly excited about?
The command and control system and the adjustment of the whole personnel establishment system. In this regard, actually, China has been learning from Western countries as a whole military reform has been the result of learning. This time, the learning could be more thorough. Say the separation of the command and control system and political affairs could make the former more focused on warfare. A commander in the past did not have the requisite conditions to do so, as he had to manage eating, drinking, and all the trivial things of everyday living. But now, their only job is to manage warfare well. This makes a great difference. I think we have to mention about the downsizing of the armed forces. President Xi Jinping made it clear at the September the 3rd parade that we would cut back 300,000 members of the military by 2020, down from 2.3 million in the past to the goal of 2 million. This may be a tough process for China, yet also a process that we must go through. Today's warfare is no longer about the size of the army anymore. On many occasions, we may fight unmanned wars. Therefore, a country with a populated army force doesn't necessarily mean it has a strong force. Its capability depends on the quality of the force. With downsizing, we can use the money saved to improve the treatment and welfare of the soldiers, or improve R&D and purchase more advanced weapons. The above-mentioned 2 points are what impressed me most.
How about from an equipment point of view or concentration on technologies? Where is the PLA moving?
I think the PLA is moving toward modernization, which has different connotations in today's world than before, and it may vary in different countries. For China, I think the military hardware based on informatization may be more important. With this, I'm mainly referring to the command and control system. As for modernization of nuclear weapons, well, frankly speaking, first it costs a lot. Then, if in the future countries around the world all call for its reduction, it will be a burden to destroy them. More importantly, as long as we have a certain amount of nuclear weapons to deter others, it would be pretty enough. Our nuclear policy is quite clear. We will not use nuclear weapons toward non-nuclear weapon states or initiate an arms race with nuclear states. So they serve nothing for food or clothing. As long as we have 1 or 2 for deterrence, it will be enough. The key is to adapting to the needs of modernization, particularly in terms of development of information. How can one fight a war in the era of information? We see another trend. With the development of information and communication technologies, especially with computer technology, we have more and more unmanned vehicles, in the air or underwater and so on. Maybe wars in the future will be unmanned wars, particularly between big nations. I think this trend of development is pretty clear in the wars in Iraq and Syria. Of course, in this regard, we may find it difficult to take the lead. We are also following the trend. This is because our armies haven't been engaged in warfare for many years. We are not like Americans who have fought 5 major wars since the end of the Cold War, plus this time in Syria, the number would be 6. So, in this regard, our armies need to learn from the Americans.
So I would like to just think of all of the categories of different responsibilities that the PLA Navy in particular would have at this time. If you would look into the future, what are the characteristics of the Navy that it should have in order to fulfill this properly? What should its size be, its capabilities? How can you give a general assessment of the kind of Navy that China would need to accomplish at least these 4 objectives?
It is hard to quantify, but I want to introduce some concepts. First, we will tailor our naval force to the task it is assigned to. Although we've made huge progress compared to the past, there's still a long way to go. And we have 2 guiding principles. First, we have to develop according to our demand. Second, we develop upon feasibility. It's not possible to devote all resources for development of the army and sacrifice the national economy. Everything should fare within a reasonable boundary. Third, we will not engage ourselves in the arms race. The development of the Chinese Navy is just to fulfill the tasks you mentioned. In addition to that, we will not compete with others. I think the development of the Chinese military has been pretty fast over recent years. People say our Air Force witnessed blowout development, and so does our naval force. But I think such a rapid trend is only temporary instead of long-term and sustainable. In the past, we developed quite slowly as we had to be patient and bear the pressure for the general deployment. Nowadays, things have changed. We have accumulated the capabilities and we are in a tight schedule. So we sped up a bit. Yet the pace won't last forever. It has to drop to a certain extent in the future. What we can do is to focus more on the quality instead of the quantity as we seek for development. We have to maintain first-class standards rather than stay happy being in the second tier. There is no second best in war. Only the one who wins has final say. So we have to maintain our defensive capability at a world-class level.
PLA planning and scenario planning and planning the kinds of equipment that's needed and the kind of modernization that the PLA has. Do you, in your thinking, imagine different kinds of war scenarios? Because that's what military men need to do. All military men in all countries do that. So when China does that and you plan the PLA restructuring for the future and modernization of the PLA, how do you imagine your potential enemies? Obviously, the United States it's no state secret to say that the United States is somebody that you would obviously plan against due to various conflicts, Taiwan, South China Sea, etc. But how does that work? What are the potential wars that you would see for the future, and how do you plan the PLA vis-a-vis the U.S.?
Well, I think from China's point of view, our major enemy is secessionism in Taiwan. Because of our special culture, which is different from the West or the Americans or that of many other countries in the world, dating back to the era of Emperor Qin Shi Huang, China advocated a culture of unification and cannot tolerate secession within its borders. But today, with Taiwan secessionists, the relationship between mainland China and Taiwan has not become closer with exchanges of personnel and economic development. Rather, the call for secession gets stronger. So this is the most imminent and realistic problem we face. I'm concerned that the mainland may be forced to address this issue with military operations. While we will never voluntarily seek warfare, but once a war gets triggered, American officials, from the President of the States to top commanders, will all resort to armed defense as they promised. If that's indeed the case, warfare between China and America is also inevitable. It would be a war beyond imagination, and I see no winner out of it. So as we consider the issue of Taiwan, we have to take America into consideration as well. Otherwise, we may get very passive. What we are preparing for now is Taiwan secession. We should be aware that modernization of the PLA started from 1996, when we realized the danger of Taiwanese secession as America failed to keep its promise and issued Lee Teng-hui a visa.
The common perception in the West, particularly among Western military planners, is that the PLA expects sometime in the future, maybe by mid-century, 2050, maybe even later, that at some time in the future, the PLA will be the largest and most powerful military in the world. What would the PLA say to that in terms of its long-term thinking and long-term planning?
I will not live long enough to witness changes in 2050, not even if I live for 100 years. It is hard to say whether we will be the most powerful, but at least we would be among the top, one of the first-class armies in the world. We will not necessarily try to be the best in everything we do, but in terms of the general defensive capability, we would be good enough to hold a place in the world arena. But in terms of aircraft carriers, we would not compare with the US, not even 50 or 100 years into the future. Others I cannot tell for sure, but this is what I see pretty clearly. But in terms of aircraft forces or some other relevant technologies, we may rival the US. Our navigation technology, the building of fleets, the fire depot system, the radar system, the comprehensive capabilities or stealth frigates, electronic operating systems, etc., are all developing rapidly. I don't believe the Chinese are any worse than others. We'll finally catch up with the world standard in terms of quality and efficiency. I see a great possibility in it. Regarding the Air Force, China has its counterparts in the American F-35 and F-22. Although we may not compete with the US in terms of the number or certain technology index, yet in some, they have already overtaken the US, and we are seeing a trend of catching up with it. I believe we won't wait till 2050. Just 10 years from now, we'll be among the leading countries in military technology. We don't aim to gain the edge in an all-around way. We only seek development on a proper scale. However powerful Chinese armies get, we will not bully others. We will not intimidate others with our aircraft carriers, or invade or raid with advanced weapons. There is no possibility for China to do so.
Foreign analysts assume that the PLA, created and led by the Communist Party of China, is planning for the day, say by 2050, when it will become the strongest military force in the world, supplanting the United States. That is not at all clear. What is clear is that, in addition to the PLA's overarching mandate to protect the country, there are 6 kinds of PLA missions. First, Taiwan remains the most serious concern. Second, defending China's sovereignty along its long borders. Third, safeguarding China's trade routes and sea lanes, such as conducting anti-piracy operations. Fourth, protecting Chinese citizens, whether in natural disasters at home or from perils abroad. Fifth, humanitarian missions. Sixth, peacekeeping work as mandated by the United Nations. As most of these missions are sea-based, the PLA is shifting resources to its Navy, becoming, in essence, the People's Liberation Armed Forces. The PLA is getting smarter, modernizing its forces, developing leapfrog technologies. China may differ with certain neighbors as to borders, but no one I know has some ultimate plan to invade other countries. Non-interference is a foundational principle of China's foreign policy. Yet the world we watch is dynamic and messy, and what may be certainties today may become ambiguities tomorrow. Watching the PLA is high on our list, keeping closer to China.